Hi, and welcome to A Victorious Life, an outreach teaching ministry of the Shallow Holiness Church, located at 2419 North Glass Street, here in the beautiful city of Roses, Tyler, Texas. You know, don't change the channel, don't change the dial. For those of you still operating with rotary televisions, I'm curious to know if that's still possible. I'm your host, Lori Simpson Ortega, and as always, we want to say thank you for allowing us to come into your homes by way of VPN broadcasting. This is our 10th year of television ministry, and we are excited. Every time it's time for us to tape, I know the cameraman can vouch for this, I get excited. Even I can be taking a nap, doorbell ring, once the camera is like action, and it's again business as usual. I cannot contain my excitement and my joy at the thought that this is July. And you know what happens in July, Mr. Cameraman? No, you do not. But in July, they start, workout. Don't they start the summer workouts and they start the training for football season?
Oh, yeah, they do training.
They start training camp start. Yeah, they start that. Those high school boys start suiting up. They do one a days and they go to two a days.
Yeah, that's in August though.
Okay, well.
Professionals in July.
Okay. Yeah. The Cowboys, this is going to be our year. We're going to do it this year. But he is a Packers fan, so don't even look up, Mr. Cameraman. Keep reading the scriptures.
Yeah,
but
that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, now he's trying to throw shade at the Cowboys. Okay, but we are excited, not just because it's football season is approaching, but we like the camaraderie of going back to school, that excitement of, watching the kids mature and then, I need to stop playing. I love that good old football competition. And you know what? The Olympics, that's what I need to do. I need to get 4 hula hoops and color them and then have the Olympics for the backdrop, because I've watched all the trials so far, the gymnastics, men's, women's. I even watched some soccer games. I've watched some diving competitions. So I already know in my mind who's going to be competitive. And you know what else, Mr. Cameraman? The last week I was watching the women's gymnastics, and I thought about Dominique Dawes, and I was like, that she's a grown woman now, but
she's got
about 39 or 29. What else?
Like in her 40,
but I just remembered she always looked so serious and so focused, and it was like, even as an adult, I'm like, if I ever meet that child, I automatically know no nonsense. But yeah, I love the Olympics. I will be watching them. I will figure out how to that would be a good Bible study, really, on perseverance and determination. Yeah, okay, so let's get through Exodus, and maybe in the next 4 years of the Olympics. Okay, I'm being funny. I am going to do that. I'm going to start working on an Olympic Bible study. That would be neat. Okay. Yeah. I kind of like that much. Did you take a note of that? Remind me. Text me that, Mr. Creative Director. Oh, and that's another thing. We get to see the reporters on the sides of the football games this year. Yeah, you know what? I kind of wouldn't mind wanting to sit at the ESPN desk. I think I would be the person that would be, when they start saying stuff, I'd be like, nah, come on, stop playing. You know that, man. That team is about as far as they're going. But I guess you can't be that way.
Well, you could work. That would work on First Take.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I should do that. Maybe I'll get invited to somebody's show to talk nothing but just straight East Texas trash.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would like that.
That might happen.
Okay.
That might happen.
And you know what? I think I would be on there saying things like, well, you know what? We need to call 911 Jesus because he needs some talent or whatever. Yeah, but I don't think I'd be a good news reporter standing on the sidelines. I'd be like, look, whoever child this is, come get him because he's hurting people. All right. Let's go to Exodus chapter 8, verse 20 to 24 before I make an idiot out of myself. We have been talking about, we're still teaching from the book of Exodus, and on last week, this is part 2. For those of you tuning in, don't change the dial. I just didn't change my shirt. It says part 2. So we hope this is something that that you're on the edge of your seats with and interested in studying. We've been talking about the plague. So we're on plague number 4. So Exodus chapter 8, verses 20 through 24. It says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me." Okay, when I read that, "Thus saith the Lord, let my people go," why did I hear that in Charlton Heston's voice in my head? Dun, 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 dun. You remember that? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, that's...
James Earl Jones.
Yeah, no. When I hear James Earl Jones, I think of Luke, I'm your father. Okay, see, we're chasing rabbits. Exodus chapter 8, verse 20. Now, let me backtrack and talk to you about what we've been talking about, understanding patterns, not just in the biblical characters, but also how these spiritual patterns develop in our lives. Again, we're reading about how God gives instruction. And remember we said preparation, instruction, obedience, expected end. And remember we said that preparation and instruction can rotate depending, but you're always prepared. So here in Exodus chapter 8, verses 20 through 24, the Lord begins to give Moses even more instructions. Okay, so he tells him in verse 20th what to say to Pharaoh. And notice he tells him, "Tell Pharaoh, let my people go." Okay, let them go. Verse 21, "Else," meaning or else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee and upon thy servants and upon thy people and into thy houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are." Verse 22, "And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. And I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be." And the Lord did so. And there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted by reason of the swarm of flies. Now, this is very important because you remember this is the 4th plague. And we said that the plagues were sent as for 4 specific reasons. They were sent as judgments against those false gods that the Egyptians and some of the Israelites, sadly, had started worshiping. The plagues were sent to show that, to display God's power, not just to the Hebrew or the Egyptians, but to the Israelites as well. We also said that the plagues were sent so that the Israelites would know that God was with them, that he was not just with them, but that he was for them. So it would confirm, hey, what you've been trusting in, what you've been believing in, it's going to happen. And they were used because the 10 of them, not just because they served 10 gods, because there were a myriad of gods that the Egyptians were serving. But remember we said that the number 10 from the biblical numerics represents structure and government. So there were 10 of them sent to basically address how not necessarily how Egypt had been governing itself, but how that system, that faulty system, had manifested itself in the lives of the Israelites. So there was a reason, again, why those 10 plagues were taking place. So in verse number 4, or Exodus chapter 8, verses 20 through 24, they're just flies. God said there were going to be flies everywhere, and flies came from out of nowhere. So the $100,000 question arises as to Why flies? Because remember we said God just wasn't just sitting up there just thinking of stuff to do. The reason there were flies is because flies was a judgment against the fly god, and I cannot pronounce his or her name, Uatchit. Okay, now I could be mispronouncing that. And when I went to go do a pronunciation check, it sounded like a bad word, so I'm just gonna, I'm gonna keep it like that. Uatchit. Okay, so why flies? Flies were a judgment against the fly god that I just spelt out, and the significance of this plague is that it distinguished, it distinguished between the Israelites and the Egyptians. There was a dividing line, because remember in verse number 22 when it says, I will sever in that day the land of Goshen. That means divide, so that all of everything to my left, okay, the Egyptians, there were flies. But it's kind of like everything to my right, it remained business as usual. And you know what? That is a testimony to the power of God over creation. That's really what these animals, with these different animal plagues, it was showing that, hey, if y'all are running around here and these other entities are masquerading as gods, then they should be able to control themselves. So if there's a fly god and God is just sending flies, then whoever is Lord of the flies should be able to tell the flies, wait a minute, no, we're not doing that. I'm grabbing, myself or my people, my flies, and I'm putting my flies in check. But that didn't happen, because again, remember we just said one of the reasons for the plague was for God to display his power, so that not just the Egyptians would know that he's God, but the Israelites. Now, I'm just going to be upfront with you. If I were an Egyptian and I was walking around, and if Tyler was Egypt, and I'm looking and I drive flies everywhere, but as soon as I get to the Lindale city limit sign, there are no flies, you know what? I'm inclined to believe that I would want to do one of two things: either move to Lindale or find out, what do y'all believe over here? Because that was obvious. So that the flies, this particular plague, it just wasn't because God just wanted to call flies, but it was to show a dividing line, a separating line between the Israelites and the Egyptians. Now look at what happens from verses 25 to 32, which is chapter 8. All of chapter 8, when you get to chapter 8, the end part of it, Pharaoh, from verses, we'll say 25 to 20, well, just 25. Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron and said, go ye, sacrifice to your God in the land. So he tells them when the flies, he says, okay, look, all right, I've had enough. I want you to go to go sacrifice. Okay. Now look at verse 26. And Moses said, it is not meet so to do, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and will they not stone us? We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he shall command us. Okay, now this is where things start to shift, because based on the KJV Bible, verse number 25, Pharaoh tells him, okay, I'm going to let you go. Okay, but notice it says in the land. So then Moses listens to him, and a shift begins to occur within Moses. All right. Because really in verse number 25, and I'm looking at the PowerPoint notes that I've made for this study. We didn't print these off the internet. This is just from the PowerPoint, because you get more out of, because it's high tech at the Tuesday Bible study. But I put in here conditions and restraints. So Pharaoh wants to let them go, but he wants to do it on his own terms and on his own conditions. And he wants to still let them go, but he's going to restrain them to a certain extent. Now, I want to stop here and let's make this one verse 25, applicable to our walk with Christ. The enemy, he wants to let you go, but with conditions, okay? He doesn't, and when I say he wants to let you go, I'm not saying he wants to let you go draw closer to the Lord. That's never his intentions. What he wants to do is he wants to let you go deeper into the dives of depression. He wants you to go deeper into drug addiction and all of those different things, because those are always his conditions. He wants things that will restrain you from being the best possible you. So when you look at this, Pharaoh was really no different. He was planning on letting the people go, or he said he was going to let them go, but they were based on his conditions. And that's something that we, as modern day believers, we really have to stop and understand. We can't live this life based on the conditions and restraints that we ourselves place on the Lord. Because you know what? I have a feeling some of you kind of know what I'm talking about. Because sometimes people will find themselves in dire straits and they'll pray like never before. They'll say blanket statements when things hit home. You know, church, we need to pray like never before. Well, we just took for granted that you was praying. What do you mean pray like never before? I thought every day was a never before mentality. You know, some people will say, you know what, I'm going to start living this life like never before. I'm going to get more serious about it. Okay, why have you not been serious prior? You know, why previously? Why were you not as concerned? What life dilemma, what life circumstance, what negative situation did you find yourself in to help you to realize, I need to stop hypocriting? You know, those are the conditions. How many times have people prayed, Lord, if you do this for me? Or you've prayed with people that said, I told the Lord, if he did this for me, I would do that. First of all, you cannot bargain with God. You can't say, if you do this, I'll do that. He's God. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. He knows the outcome. So he knows the inner chambers of not just your heart, but your mind. He knows, he sees, and he knows, and he understands when you're making haphazard promises, because that's what basically Pharaoh was saying and doing. He wanted to let them go, but with conditions. And then when you look at verses 26 and 27, Moses is being obedient, has continued to remain obedient to what God has told him. Every instruction God has given him, he has fulfilled. He's walked in obedience. So we automatically know, you know, what his expected end is going to be. We know how this is going to end. And that's one thing as a student, a Bible study student, what you start to realize, you're picking up on these patterns, and you'll be able to tell rather quickly what happens when people, once God gives them instructions, they walk in obedience. You know what their expected end is going to be. But sometimes in some of those characters, we'll say like with David, he walked in obedience, but then he got out of order. But what happened? He was able to see himself by way of Nathan the prophet, I believe, came and told him, hey, this is what this is. And he repented, and then he made straight paths for his feet. But you do get to see those different patterns. So verses 26 through 27, a shift occurs within Moses, which is something that is a testament, to his growing in character, in his growing in spiritual character. You're able to now see how, as the situations change, the more he leans and depends on the Lord, the more the Lord fulfills his word, not just Moses' word, but the more he fulfills his word by way of signs, demonstrations, miracles, wonders, etc., the more you see how Moses is gaining that relationship with him. So Moses, in verses 26 through 27, Moses basically says to Pharaoh that's not going to be wise. You know, that's not a wise choice, because if we start sacrificing and the Egyptians are around, that's gonna throw them off, and they're gonna get upset because they're gonna think that we're trying to compete with them, and that we're sacrificing the way they sacrifice. The first time they start slicing lambs' neck, throats, and all the goats and the doves and all that kind of stuff, the Egyptians, because of the plagues that have transpired, they're basically going to arm themselves and start thinking, wait a minute, these people got some weapons now. Where's these people? Why do we put weapons in the hands of the enemy or the people that we've oppressed for all these hundreds of years? So that's what Moses was. He was trying to communicate that, and he was saying, and we need to go where God has told us to go, not where you have dictated for us to go. So you see that shift begins to occur in Moses, where Moses isn't as green as he used to be. And he understands that if they go sacrifice where Pharaoh told them to sacrifice, Pharaoh has an ulterior motive, and that situation would be used or be turned in basically into a bloodbath. Because why? God had already prepared Moses. Hey, from way back in the wilderness, he had already told him, you know what, this is not going to go well for Pharaoh. He's not just going to let y'all go. He's not just going to do this. So you see a shift that occurs within Moses. Now, let's make that applicable to our walk with Christ. There comes a point in our lives where when we've been with the Lord, we become what you call vested. Not saying that you can't, make mistakes or what have you, and you can't just walk away and throw your hands up. Me personally, I do not believe in the theory that's floating around, once saved, always saved, because, you got the Bible says, come out from among them and be separate, meaning once Christ is in your life, he died so that you could stop walking in sinful mentalities and sinful state. He didn't walk, he didn't die and resurrect. He didn't go through all that so you could still be out here at the club just kicking it and getting all sloppy drunk, and they having to, you getting behind car wheels and driving and like drunk driving, and you getting so high you beating up people, and who's getting the glory from that behavior? That's the opposite of what God ordained for the life of man. So when we apply, how can we apply this to our lives? Well, there comes a point where when we're with Christ and we have experienced His power in our lives and He's working through us, then not only does a shift in our mentality change, but a shift in our character changes. We experience what is referred to as spiritual growth. We grow spiritually, so that when life rushes in, that carnal mind, and we talked about from Romans chapter 8, that carnal mind, that mind that is disrespectful, unruly, egotistical, narcissistic, arrogant, when that arises, when that starts to arise within us, because we are covered with His blood, we understand, now wait a minute, that's my old mind. I used to think like that, but that didn't get me anywhere. So that's why I accepted Christ, and I accepted Christ so I could be better. So if this runs the risk of making me worse instead of better, I don't need that in my life. And that's really what Moses is experiencing. He's experiencing spiritual growth and also character growth. Whereas before Moses was always a doubter, he was always skeptical, but now you see him walking in the power and the authority of the Lord. Why? Because he's had some experiences with Him. And again, for our lives, the more we live this life, the more we live this Christian life, and we walk in Christian faith, and we put our trust and our belief, and we do as He has instructed us to do, then the more we understand, now wait a minute, I'm growing. Things that used to bother you. You know, I'm going to be upfront with you, Mr. Cameron. It used to bother me when I found out people were telling stories on me or lying on me. They used to bother me. And I will admit, on occasion, I have tracked a few lies down. Because back in the day, when I first came to the Lord, that would bother me. Because I would say, you know, I'm up here trying to do right. And people don't have nothing but stuff to make up on me. I'm going to find out who said that, and I'm going to stop that. And on a couple times I did do that. But you know what? The more I walk with the Lord and I began to grow spiritually, the more I realized, let that go. Just let it go. In time, the truth will be known. And you'll be able to walk away from the table with clean hands. Let me take care of it. And you know what? So now, as you know, as I've matured, I'm not chasing nothing down, okay? Because it's not going to help with my spiritual growth, and it takes up too much natural time. And using that example to say this, you reach a point where you grow spiritually, where before you get upset because the person is telling stories on you or misconstruing what you're saying, once you start growing, it's like, wait a minute. Well, that person, I don't know what that person has going on in their lives, but Lord, help that person to be the best that they can be. You pray for that person. You start to sympathize and empathize. The reason they're saying this is because look at their situation. Look at where they're coming from. Look at the dynamics of their life. So you don't really pray, Lord, put hot coals on the person and Lord, strike them dead. You know, waste time praying those prayers. You pray for intercession, prayers of intercession, like, Lord, I don't know what they have going on in their lives, but you know, you see, you care, help them, whatever situation they're facing, Lord, let them see that I am not the enemy, other people are not the enemy, and again, you become like Moses. You see that shift. That shift starts to occur, that sometimes things that used to bother you, they just roll off you like water on a duck's back now, because you're not concerned about that. You're concerned about getting the big picture. What's the big picture? Like we said on last week, that this thing is bigger than you or I, that some of the challenges that we face are not about us, but it's about God using us, working in us and through us to draw other people to Him. God allowing for certain things to happen that are beyond our control so that He can display His power within us, and that He can display His power to us, and He can show other people His power of how He has dealt to a certain extent with us, and dealt with not in a necessarily a bad way, but those are some things that we have to understand that comes with spiritual growth and then good spiritual solid character. I used to hear my parents, they would say some things after they had been, before they passed away, they had been saved and spirit filled for 30 plus years. But when we would sit down and talk to them, it's like some of the stuff that they said they did, they were like, some of that was just crazy. That was just you. That was spiritual inexperience, and they said they meant well. And at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. And one of those things, my mother, it was kind of funny, and I can say this to her now, or say this about her now, because she's not here. She's been dead now going on 10 years. But my mother had always been afraid of needles. And she said, she went somewhere, and she said, God's going to grow me some teeth. She said, one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have all brand new teeth. So my siblings and I, we just kind of looked like, okay, well, good luck with that. And we went to a revival in Dallas, she and I and this other lady once, years ago, and there was a testimony about how the Lord had grown this lady some teeth. Now, I am not a skeptic, Mr. Cameron, because I know some of y'all diehards out there, they're going to start calling me and say, God can do anything. I'm not saying that God can't do anything. I'm just using this as an example and how my mother worked through it. So if y'all have a problem with what I say, go tell her, because these are her words. So we were sitting there, and the lady was testifying and all that. So on the way home, you know, I was a teenager. I was just basically just along for the ride. And I was not walking with the Lord. I wasn't a teenager, actually. I was like home from college. So no, my mind was not on the Lord at that time. I was just, again, tagging along. So my mother, the lady they were just sitting in the front seat, and they were saying, yeah, he can do it. She said, oh, Sister Stimpson, I believe the Lord can do it. He can work it out. So my mother said, or the lady said, what do you think? You think the Lord can work it out? I said, yeah, I believe he can work it out. And she said, and you believe if we go, maybe I should have gotten that line. The lady said, maybe, Sister Stimpson, maybe you should have gotten that line, and he would have grew you some teeth. And the lady said, what do you think about that, Lord? I said, well, given the fact that he had false teeth, I don't think maybe that's something he wouldn't be able to do. Because if he could grow teeth, he would not have bought his own. You know what I'm saying? And you know what? My mother said, that is so right. That is right. That was on a Friday night. Mr. Cameraman asked me what my mother did on Monday morning. My mother called Dr. Dwayne Peace on 5th Street to get her a set of dentures. Okay? Now, I know that sounds funny, but again, and I don't know how that all ties. But my point with that, can God do anything? Yes, he can do anything. He's God. He can do whatever he wants to do. Some things he doesn't do. Okay? Some things he gives us the human intellect and knowledge, the human discipline, and the human finances to get some of those things done. In this case, it was he used her intellect, her knowledge, and her finances, and the skills of Dr. Dwayne Peace on 5th Street to design some dentures for her. Now, this is, and using my mother as example, again, not taking away or diminishing from the power of God, because had he wanted to do that, he would have did that years ago. But after she got her dentures, we were having a conversation where she said, you know, I was sitting up there waiting for the Lord to do this, and she said, I can only imagine how I was really looking, you know, prior to getting dentures, you know, talking like this. When you had the monies, you had the insurance, you know, dental insurance, you had the things that you needed. And you know what? After that, you got your dentures, you're skinning and grinning and smiling, and you going all over preaching and teaching the word. Hey, God didn't have to waste no time trying to grow you some molars and some canines and all that. Because why? That wasn't in his plan. Some things he grows us to just simply walk. Look, what is it? See it and keep on walking. And that's what we see with Moses. Moses had grown to where he was understanding, wait a minute, spiritual things are spiritual things. Natural things are natural things. You know, I had a conversation with my brother, Dennis, and we were talking about, he said, Lord, I don't understand. He said, I'm living up here in the Metroplex. He said, in every charismatic evangelical I know, he's like, they are praying to God for not just hundreds of dollars, but millions and billions and trillions of dollars. And he said, and I've had the occasion of talking to him saying, now, wait a minute. Where do you work? I don't. Okay. Where you don't work part-time? Or do you work for yourself? No. The Lord meets and he supplies my needs. And he said, he's like, okay, so how can I help you? Well, the Spirit of the Lord told me there was going to be a man here today that had this, that was going to give me this, and he'll be wearing this, and you sound like the man. Well, first of all, my brother would say, well, no, the Lord didn't tell me. He has not touched my heart in one way, shape, form, or fashion. He said, if anything, I do know people who are over HR, who are HR directors and HR VPs, so maybe he touched He told you to come see me so I could connect you with the people to get you a job so that you could have a steady stream of income. And, you know, he said, Lori, that brings up $100,000 question. You know, he's like, why are we always praying for all of this? You know, not just, Lord, I thank you for meeting and supplying my need, and I thank you for my ways, you know, let my ways be pleasing so you can give me the desires. It's like, why are we all trying to go out here and get these high dollar, walk in these overly expensive places that we can't afford? He said, I would love a Porsche. He said, was it Porsche 911 or some new Porsche? He said, but that's $15,000. $15,000 insurance a year, because you've got to the car has to be covered enough, insured enough to pay for itself, basically pay for its loss. He said, so why would the Lord bless me with a Porsche that I can't even afford to pay the insurance on? $300-400 for oil change. You know, God forbid you get a flat. So again, it goes back to this point. He grows us spiritually, and he also grows us naturally so that we can see natural things in life. If you've accepted, and here comes Miss Cameron, I know you may go like, doo. If we are believers in Christ, and we are saying that we are Christians, that we're believers, that we are living this life, and you have not progressed naturally in life, something's wrong with your gospel. Okay, now I'm not preaching or teaching a prosperity gospel or message. Please hear me out. But just like we said in Exodus chapter 8, verses 26 through 27, if a shift has occurred within him to now isolate spiritual things and understand natural things, we serve that same God. Why is he not telling us and showing us you need to progress in life naturally? Why? Because the gospel is a progressive gospel. You grow. Every aspect of your life grows. If you look back 5-6 years from now, or 5-6 years, you look back 5 years, and you're still in the same spiritual state, the same mental, emotional, physical, and financial state, that doesn't have anything to do with the Lord. That's you. You have become blinded to the fact that you need to progress. And there are some things in this life that you will need to do. And I'm not here to just put the burden of proof on you. I know of what I speak because I've experienced that. You know, when you live for the Lord and you're walking with him, you know, there are times everything's not going to be perfect. Everything is not going to be, you know, it's not going to work like clockwork. You'll know it's of God when it works like clockwork, when you don't have to try to figure it out. But you're going to be in some situations where you got to make some hard decisions. You're going to have to make some tough calls. You're going to be in a position where you're like, I don't know what to do. Where is this coming from? And it's at that moment when you stop, you humble yourself, and you say, Lord, look, I need your help. I need you to help me through this. Help me understand. Is there anything that I've done? And again, I try to live in a glass house. I'll be the first one to tell you, I haven't always done some things that are right. I haven't always made the right choices. I have gone out, Mr. Cameron. I know they're going to be shocked and amazed. I have spent money that I needed to save on things of a frivolous nature. I know y'all can't believe that, right? Cameron is sitting up here like, what? You know, I've opted out of making some good stewardship choices because there were some other things that I wanted to do. I wanted that purse. I wanted those shoes. I wanted that ring, or I wanted that necklace, and I wanted that. At that moment, I wanted that, and I felt like that was the end-all, be-all. This was the last purse they had. They weren't going to get any more. So what did I do? I made some poor choices. And I bought that purse, knowing I had all these other obligations. Now, how did that work out for the glory and the honor of the Lord? Well, you know what? It didn't work out at that moment. Money didn't just come from nowhere. I didn't go get in a line with $10 or $5. I had some of those choices I had to ride out. Okay, I had to go without. Meaning, if you bought it, you can't just spend money like it's water. You got to get somewhere and sit down. But I had to reach a point where I'm like, Lord, show me, teach me, what am I doing wrong? Why am I running out of this? Why is this not happening? And when he showed me the problem, I was able to look around. It's that purse, them shoes, that piece of jewelry, that suit, that crafting, that wool for that rug hooking. It was that fabric. And what ended up, how did he use that? He used that so that spiritually I could say and see, no, this has nothing to do with the enemy. Naturally, I could see you don't need all this stuff. Why are you buying all this stuff? Why do you need this purse? You said that about all 15 of those other ones. So what's so special about this one? If it means don't go to the mall, don't go to the mall. Meaning if until you get to the point where it's like you can't just walk away, you feel like, oh, I gotta have this. This is it. No. So there's a shift within us. So saying again, if you've been with Christ and you're still in the same situation after 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you still got the same testimony of, I needed the Lord to do this for me. I needed him to pay this bill. I needed him to help me get. You're just scratching the surface of the life. And what you need to realize is that is when you're going to have to, he's going to help you to become more disciplined. He's not going to get you out of that situation until you realize that a problem exists. Okay? Until you realize, wait a minute, what's really going on. So we see again in those verses, there's a shift within Moses, kind of like what he does in us. He helps us to isolate things of a spiritual nature from those of a natural nature so that we can grow and understand those. So then when you get to verse number 28, look at what happens. Pharaoh says to him, all right, okay, you got me. I'll release you. I'll let you go, and I'll let you sacrifice to God. He says, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go sacrifice in the wilderness. But this is what's interesting to me. Look at what it says. Only ye shall not go very far away. Entreat me. He was saying, now, I'm going to let you go, but you can't go too far. And basically pray for me when you get there. All right. That, brothers and sisters, is something that we see in our society. Manipulation. You can't manipulate God. You can manipulate people. People can definitely be manipulated, but God can't be manipulated. So Pharaoh is saying to Moses and Aaron, yeah, okay, I'm going to let him go, but y'all can't go too far. And just, when you get there, not only pray for me, but just allow me to do this. I can't let you go, completely. But I'll let you go a little, you can go like a mile up the highway, but you got to come back. But when you get there, just remember that I let you go a mile up the highway. So pray good things for me. And we see that. We see people who have no intentions of living for the Lord, no intentions of changing their lifestyle. But what's the first thing they say in times of trouble? Pray for me. When in good times, when you say, well, you know what, the Lord brought you out of this situation. I know it was a good Lord, and I thank you for praying for me, as they are blowing cigarette smoke to the side. Well, they basically told you, you're headed for emphysema, liver cancer, lung cancer, throat cancer. And when you had that scare, you remember you were telling, we were praying, and you called, and we were, walking you through that. But now that you got a clean bill of health, same thing. So then we get to verse number 29. Actually, let's do 29. It says, 29 says, and Moses said, behold, I will go out from thee, and I will entreat the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. But let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully any more in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. So look at what Pharaoh was doing. Pharaoh wanted the flies to leave. So he would say anything for peace. Sometimes, sadly, people will say anything for peace. People will say anything to get out of their situation when they don't have a heart or a mind to live for the Lord. Sometimes when people will call for prayer, or we'll see them on the street and they'll say things about, I made up in my mind, I'm going to do it. You don't have the right to tell them, no, you're not. Because as they're talking to you, the Lord is basically saying, letting you know what's really going on. So they don't know that the Spirit within you is allowing you to hear and know more about their situation than they're sharing. And a perfect place to give an example of that is in the prison. In the prison there was this young man, a beautiful, gifted voice, gifted singer and choir director and all those things. And the Lord led me to tell him, hey, you know what? You're going home. You need to start preparing to go home. And that's one of the things that we do tell the incarcerated. When you're not going to be here forever. Prepare to re-enter society. If you know you came in here, you didn't have a GED or a high school diploma, please get one of those before you leave. And if possible, learn a trade so that you can be a productive citizen and you're not having to, just kind of snatch and grab for, jobs, because you're going to be competing with people that don't have records. So this particular young man, he had sat in the class for maybe about 5 or 6 years, and he had prepared and everything. And one day I was talking to him, and I heard it just as plain as day. I heard, you know what, you're going home. You're going to be paroled, and we're just going to thank the Lord for, your release, and your family's going to welcome you with open arms and all that. So that was the first time. Maybe 6-7 months later, I found out that he came and told me that he was getting released. And when he said he was getting released, he was talking about, this is what I'm going to do. And I heard just as plain and as clear as I'm talking today, I heard tell him, if he doesn't get it right, I'm giving him another chance at life. But if he doesn't get it right and sort it out in here, when he gets out, he's coming back, and he will not have this opportunity ever again. So, and among some other things to tell him to, encourage him and say that to him, but then encourage him, because I think sometimes we're not careful. All of our gospel will be damnable, and the person will feel like, well, if it's, what's the use what's the use? So I do want to clarify that. I did say to him what I heard to say, but then I also heard to encourage him, to sell him on going home and being free and being able to live the life that God ordained for him to live and to experience life and living. So he left, we prayed, and he was in charge, he was charged, and he was empowered, and he was happy. 2 months later, he was gone. Never heard from him again, which is fine, never heard from him. And got word 2 weeks ago. Guess who's coming back? But instead of a state prison, they're going to a federal prison because you got caught up again. But what you get caught up in? You weren't doing drugs. You weren't a drug user. You had some marketable skills and talents, but you weren't making money as fast as you would like, because you'd already exhausted. You got tired of wearing the same pairs of pants for church. So you wanted to go make you some quick money. Isn't that crazy, Mr. Cameron? You wanted to go make you some quick money because that little hoopty of a car that your family had kept for you, that the air went out and it needed a starter. So you wanted to go get you a razzle-dazzle car. So you went basically back to selling drugs. And you were with 2 people that you didn't know, and who knew that you were carrying way more, as they say, than the like the Dukes of Hazzard, than the law allowed, which the law is not allowing for the transporting or selling of drug. Well, okay, that's a whole nother story. But you just got caught. They didn't know you weren't on their payroll, so you got caught. Okay, and You immediately, you didn't pass go. You didn't have a trial. They revoked your parole because you were on parole. It was a courtesy for the state to let you out. So because you were on parole, there was no reason for you to have a trial. So my point is, we cannot manipulate the gospel. We cannot manipulate the power of God, because that's what Pharaoh was trying to do. And we're going to close with verses 29 through 32. Look at what Moses says. Moses says to him, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to God tomorrow. I'm going to pray. I'm going to make basically intercessory prayer for you. And I want you to understand that if we go make intercessory prayer and we pray and God does this, you can't back down and renege, go back on what you said you were going to do. Sadly, that's what's happening. But I say to us as believers in Christ, don't go into it with the mentality like that, using the example of that young man. Do you think I'm going to beat him up? I'm going to find out where he is. I'm going to send him he's going to get back on the devotional list. You know, he's going to get newsletters, because we can't just toss people away. Who knows? He may do a great work for the Lord in a federal penitentiary. He may need the structure that it provides. He may be there for an indefinite amount of time, which he most definitely will do, not only finish the time that he had, but he will also increase of time. But we have to be like Moses. Remember, shift from within Moses. When people do us wrong, when people mess up, we're not God. We can't just toss them to the wind. We've got to make intercessory prayer. When people disappoint us, when they hurt our feelings, we can't just say, I'm not going to deal with anybody else. And I made up in my mind, I'm just done with everybody and I'm sick of all of this. You can't. The love, where's that love? You know, now I do believe in discipline. But I don't believe we should just toss people to the wind. So Moses is saying to him, I'm going to make prayer. I'm going to go intercede for you. But you got to stick with what you said you were going to do. But you know what? Trust and believe. Moses already knew. Why? Because God had prepared him. We got to take people, like they say, for face value. We've got to meet them where they are. Every drug addict I know, even the ones that I'm related to, when they're down, out, disgusted, they love the Lord. They love their family. They're going to do it right. I'm going to do it. And we've got to be there, whether they're functioning without drugs free, or if they're high as a kite, because the love that the Lord has instilled in us, we've got to be there to make intercessory prayer for them, because it could be a lot worse off. You know, it could be, you know, they could die. They could be, what happens if they're paralyzed and they're crippled? Who's going to take care of them? You know, that's why we're not in a situation where we say we just want to pray for the good stuff. No, we want to pray my prayers for the good people. No, you got to understand, people will try to manipulate prayer. And finally, in verses 31 through 32, God did as Moses told Pharaoh that he would pray to God and that the flies would be removed. So he did remove the flies where there were no flies. Okay. But look at what Pharaoh did. Pharaoh hardened his heart and he didn't let him go. So you know what? There was the ulterior motive. And if we're not careful, as believers in Christ, when we pray and we keep bombarding heaven for tangible goods and services and not asking for better understanding, better way of quality or clarity of thinking and instruction and guidance, we'll keep going to God like Pharaoh with an ulterior motive, because we want our 40 acres and our mules. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to find ourselves not growing or advancing spiritually or naturally. Well, you know what? We are all out of time, and I pray that something was said to strengthen and encourage your walk with Christ, because Mr. Cameron, we said a whole lot. Join us here, same time next week, same channel. We're going to pick up in Exodus chapter 9, because it's really starting, the plot is definitely starting to thicken. Join me at the park on Monday night, 6 to 7, Burkeville Park, check us out on the website and give us a call. Prayer requests. You'll see our schedule. And as we always say, if you have Christ, you're already a winner. If you have the Spirit of the living God, you can face any challenge life throws your way. You can live a victorious life. God bless you.